Don't lie, we all watched some of the trial, but even when you put that aside, what actor is more iconic than Johnny Depp? Appearing in films since the mid-80s, Depp has had a wide variety of roles all across the morality spectrum. He plays heroes, villains, and everything in between. But who of these characters is truly the most noble, and which one is the most reprehensible? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge. Make sure to grab yourself a mega pint of red wine, because this is Johnny Depp characters good to evil. As usual, we'll be starting off with our most noble character and working our way down. These characters are the good. The gold medal of good goes to Ichabod Crane from the Tim Burton film Sleepy Hollow. Crane is a police constable in the 1790s who is sent upstate to investigate the titular town. Crane is looking to find out the truth behind a myriad of brutal decapitations. He's lambasted for his usage of scientific methods, especially when people consider that the killer may be a spirit. He tries his best to solve the murder, even taking the orphan child of one of the victims under his wing. Crane not only deduces the truth behind someone controlling the horsemen,
the horseman does not kill at random,
but also the truth that the victims are all linked by a conspiracy. Of course, all this turns out to be true and they try to discredit him. Not only does he return the skull to a grateful horseman, but he defeats Van Tassel and saves Sleepy Hollow. So Crane definitely earns the spot as Depp's most heroic character. Taking the silver medal of good is the Mad Hatter from Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland series. Upon first meeting him, the Hatter becomes a massive asset to Alice's time in Underland. He is a member of the White Queen's resistance against the Red Queen after all of his family is murdered by her people. He helps Alice escape and hide, but this causes him to be captured in her stead. He forms a special bond with Alice because they're both loners and outsiders, and he does a lot to help her on her journey. It's also heavily implied that he has some form of dissociative identity disorder, and both Depp and Burton confirm this was a part of their initial idea for the character. Despite being labeled as mad, it's also implied that he grew mad from mercury poisoning that many Hatters suffered a long time ago. Taking our bronze medal of good is Corpse Bride's Victor Van Dort. A young Victorian man in an arranged marriage for money, Victor is a nervous wreck at the best of times. He ends up in the land of the dead after accidentally proposing to a revenant named Emily. Now, the thing about this is, despite it being an arranged marriage, Victor and Victoria do love each other, and Victor tries his best to let her down easily. And obviously that doesn't happen. Throughout all of his time in the land of the dead, he tries his hardest to get back to Victoria and be with her. He's even willing to marry Emily and die once he learns that Victoria is marrying Bittern. He brings up the dead to the land of the living and reunites people with their loved ones. In the end, he's even the one who gives Emily her revenge. Victor is the purest example of a guy who is trying his best, but always kinda screws up, but it's still enough to earn him the bronze medal of good. The next character on our list is Rango from the film of the same name. Rango was a pet chameleon who gets lost in the desert and comes across the town of Dirt. He was an actor who was great at telling stories.
I'm from the west, out there, beyond the horizon.
Becoming a legend of the West and the lizard with no name. He became the sheriff of Dirt and very quickly let that power get to his head. Despite this, he tries to not only bring the water back, but save the day as well. He finds out the truth behind the mayor and tries to convince everyone of it. Sure, he does end up lying to everyone and putting a lot of people in danger, but he was trying his best, and in the end, he managed to save the day. Coming from 2013's The Lone Ranger, Tonto is up next. Tonto is a Native American from the Comanche tribe who accidentally led to the death of all of his tribe. Tonto is implied to have some sort of magical abilities as he knew about John's power as a spirit walker.
Force says you are a spirit walker.
He even forges a mystical silver bullet, believing Cavendish, the man who killed John, to be a beast known as Wendigo. It turns out that as a child, Tonto had saved Cavendish from near death out of the kindness of his heart, leading Cavendish to kill all of his tribe to keep the location a secret. Tonto deals with great guilt and wants his revenge, but he does his best to help the Lone Ranger during his quest, even telling children the tale of John and his power. Tonto is a good man who is trying to atone for the sins he believed he committed, which earns him his spot here. The next character on our list is the titular Sherlock Gnomes from Sherlock Gnomes. Now, as his name implies, he's a garden gnome version of the popular character Sherlock Holmes. He appears early on in the film facing his mortal enemy, Moriarty, and it becomes clear that he's very similar to his book counterpart. He ends up allowing Juliet and Nomeo to tag along as he hunts down Moriarty, who he thinks survived their previous encounter. Sherlock only really cares about his work, even after broken up with Irene through a letter and only visiting her for work. He's said to be a sworn protector of all gnomes, but he does cause some collateral smashing here and there. Sherlock is intensely intelligent for the most part, but he's also shown to be prideful and a workaholic. But he's still a good guy. Rounding out the good section, we have Edward from the titular Edward Scissorhands. Edward is an artificial, ageless man created by an unknown inventor, unable to be finished.
I'm not finished.
And is seen as sort of scary to those who are unaware of him. He becomes popular due to his ability to give out haircuts to women and dogs alike, and this led to him becoming friends with Kim and her family. Sure, he ends up killing Jim, but it was in self-defense, and he decides to leave behind everyone as to not hurt them because of it. Sure, Edward suffers from not understanding many social cues or what is the right thing to do in certain contexts. However, we can't really blame him, due to being stuck in a castle for decades. It's hard to say if he could have been better, but we are going to keep him in the good section. And with all the good boys out of the way, we now move into more neutral territory. These Johnny Depp characters fall in the gray area. Starting off this section, we have Barnabas Collins from 2012's Dark Shadows. Collins was a man cursed to become a vampire because he didn't love a witch as she loved him. He was buried for many years and dug up in the modern era, and is shown to become quite attached to his modern family and the wonders of the modern world. He loved a woman named Josette and has a strong obsession with her that carries over into the modern day. He tries his best to fit in, even though he's not used to it. This isn't always the case, however, because he is shown to have a strong dislike to anyone who dares betray him. He shows no forgiveness at the worst of times, especially to the main antagonist, who has tried to ruin his family. He's prone to moments of rage and anger that get the better of him, but in the end, he's not nearly as bad a person in this adaptation. Much like previous characters on this list, he suffers from not knowing how to interact with people, and we really can't hold it against him too much. Up next, we have Johnny's very first role, Glenn Lance, from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Glenn was a 17-year-old who lived on the iconic Elm Street as one of the teens having nightmares about Freddy Krueger. Glenn is part of the group that witnesses Tina's death by Freddy, and is told by Nancy to wake her in case she gets pulled into a nightmare. Glenn ends up passing out and Nancy berates him for it. After being set up for failure pretty much, he ends up killed by Krueger and is never seen again beyond a massive fountain of blood. Glenn is a typical dull kind of guy who doesn't know enough to save Nancy or himself, but none of this is malicious. And if anything, he's not even dumb enough to cause real problems. Finally, we get to Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean. Jack is a notorious and infamous pirate who has many pirate-related crimes under his belt. He's said to have an enemy in every port, and is a cross between a piratical genius and a madman.
That's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen.
Jack is also a drunkard, quite often drinking rum even during important moments. Despite his general madness and crazy actions, he is shown to get serious at times when it's necessary, due to focusing mostly on his intelligence. Relying on his intelligence, he adhered strongly to the pirate's code, the basis for his morality. We won't be getting too much into it, but a shortened version includes: every member of the crew must get a fair portion of the booty, betrayal is punished by death, killing a surrendering foe is unallowed, and unknowingly sinking other pirates is strictly forbidden. This shows that despite his rough exterior, his general silliness, and his crime-based background, he does have a consistent moral system that he follows, which makes him a perfect character for the gray area. Next up, we have Lord Charlie Mordecai from the self-titled Mordecai. Mordecai is a swindler and a quote-unquote art dealer who starts off the movie accosted by one of his victims. We learn that Mordecai and his wife have crippling debt that needs to be handled, and an opportunity falls into their lap when a police officer pressures Mordecai into helping him with an art theft case. He and his servant Jock try their best to find out who has the painting, although he gets kidnapped by people who think he has it, and accidentally leads to the death of another art dealer named Spinoza. When they find out that a man named Milton Crump has it, they try to steal it, but this goes horribly wrong, leading to Strago obtaining the fake painting. Charlie ends up obtaining the real painting and selling it to the people who kidnapped him earlier, although it's revealed that's another fake. He is a loving husband, but he's also highly deceptive. But despite all this, his crimes are unimportant at best, hence his ranking. Rounding out the gray area, we have the titular Gilbert Grape from What's Eating Gilbert Grape. Gilbert is the main character of the film and pretty much the sole caretaker to his younger brother Arnie. Gilbert also took up the role of protecting Arnie and repairing the house that was falling apart. Not to mention that his job has grown to be in danger. It becomes quickly obvious that he's not really all that great, because he does have an affair with a married woman and is a direct cause of Arnie's aquaphobia, after leaving him in the bath all night. He ends up getting close with a woman named Becky, who also becomes close with the rest of his family. However, Gilbert's anger gets the better of him. He assaults and beats up his mentally deficient younger brother, although he does feel guilty and appalled after the fact. He does eventually get forgiven and even forgives his mother for not being able to provide for her family. He tries his best, and given the circumstances, it is commendable, but he's still far from the best person. With the gray area out of the way, we now get to the dark side. These characters are the bad and the evil. The next character on our list is Willy Wonka from Tim Burton's 2005 Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Wonka is a reclusive, crazed, candy-obsessed man who, after being betrayed by his employees, shut down his factory. Wonka is shown to be erratic, quick to annoyance, and not one to listen to dissent. That said, it's also shown that he is a good boss, and generally kind of a good person, sort of, at times. Sure, his entire chocolate factory seems like a death trap, and it's implied that he might be leading the children to their doom on purpose, but we can see he didn't kill anyone. He's even shown to be quite the good boss when it comes to the Oompa Loompas, paying them in the one thing they actually want, and in one scene you can see that he even built them homes, similar to the ones in Loompaland. That said, the glaring strike against him is that even though the kids survived, he really deformed them, and he clearly doesn't care, and we couldn't in good conscience place him anywhere outside the bad section. Next up we have Axel Blackmar from Arizona Dream. Axel is a fish tagger in New York who is called down to Arizona for his uncle's trophy wedding. He is then ambushed by his family to take over the family business, which he is initially against, but decides to pursue. Axel then starts lusting after a woman named Elaine, trying to fulfill her dream of building a flying machine and rebuilding it multiple times. Somehow he decides the best way to fix this issue is to put Elaine and her stepdaughter Grace out of their misery, but he ends up unable to do it. He plays Russian roulette with Grace, but the gun doesn't work, and he eventually stops contacting Elaine in general after the death of Leo. He does try to stop Grace from her suicide attempt and ends up promising her that he'll go to Alaska for her. At the end of the film, he breaks into his uncle's Cadillac shop just to sleep there. In the end, the whole film is a very surreal experience, and it's hard to judge Axel because it's hard to say how much was even the full story. But he did try to execute 2 women because he didn't want to continue rebuilding the flying machine, which is, pretty bad. Next we have Raoul Duke from the 1998 cult film Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Where to begin with Duke, firstly, is he is a massive drug addict, which, to be clear, isn't necessarily terribly immoral in and of itself, but it is a major part of his character and we'd be remiss if we didn't point it out. Duke was hired by a magazine to cover the Mint 40 motorcycle race with his confidant, Dr. Gonzo. And to do so, they brought tons of drugs and rented an Impala for the trip. Duke's addiction leads to him firing his photographer and becoming intensely irrational around most people. He then skips out on a room service bill and his job to find Gonzo. He then convinces Gonzo to leave a drugged-out girl in a hotel room by herself while she was still tripping. By the end of the film, he blacks out and commits a lot of mayhem with Gonzo. But he does end up finishing his job and going back to LA. Duke's drug addiction may not make him a bad person by itself, but it's also no excuse for all the things that he did. Moving on to Secret Window's Mort Rainey. Mort is a man personified by his bad luck, as he starts the movie finding out that his wife is cheating on him. Mort is a reclusive mystery writer and is approached by a man who accuses him of plagiarizing his manuscript.
You stole my story.
Despite this not seeming to be the case. This leads to the man, John Shooter, giving him 3 days to provide proof and then subsequently killing Mort's dog, Chico. Shooter then tries to get Mort to change his ending to match the ending he wrote, and is then the one who seems to burn down Mort's place, destroying the evidence. Mort is forced through the ringer throughout the film, only for us to learn that Shooter is actually Mort. So all of his actions are on the part of Mort. He then kills Ted and Amy outside of his Shooter persona, and buries them under his garden, in a much happier mood. What Mort did was terrible, And we aren't making excuses, but we can't blame him entirely. It's implied he has some sort of dissociative identity disorder, and not all of his actions are his own. Taking the fourth most evil spot is the titular Sweeney Todd, from the 2007 Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Todd, originally known as Benjamin Barker, was a London-based barber who was imprisoned on false charges for 15 years. Todd came back to London and became a barber once again, wanting revenge on the judge who imprisoned him, assaulted his wife, and kidnapped his daughter. He ends up going on a killing spree, stating that everyone in London deserved to die. He was eventually able to kill both Beetle Banford and the judge and get his revenge, although this leads to his own death shortly after. Todd is a broken man who lost almost everything dear to him, and he became a serial killer and cannibal in his vengeance. Stealing the Bronze Medal of Evil is John Dillinger from the film Public Enemies. Dillinger is a notorious and charismatic bank robber who is listed as Public Enemy number 1.
Public Enemy number 1, John Dillinger.
That said, he is described as Robin Hood-esque and that era's rock and roll star, being famous despite his actions. He starts off the movie by breaking his friends out of prison, showing his loyalty, but he's also shown to be very furious when his friends get hurt, such as kicking one out because he ruined the plan and got someone killed. Dillinger only seemed to steal money from the bank as he tells people that he isn't there for the people's personal money, though he does take hostages and kills cops, so he is a bad guy. And we decided to rank him lower than Todd because he does have a higher kill count, and doesn't seem to have as good of a reason to start killing as Todd does. Taking the Silver Medal of Evil is Grindelwald from the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts franchises. Grindelwald was an immensely powerful and well-trained wizard who was born as a seer, someone who can see the future. He found that he was destined to become the Master of Death and rule the wizarding world, instantly making this his final goal. He becomes friends with Dumbledore, but the two had very different goals. His thirst for power led to him stealing the Elder Wand and committing various atrocious acts with massive waves of slaughter. He started to amass his armies, murder many, imprison others, and impersonate other wizards to stay in hiding. This is just a small fraction of the crimes he committed, and it becomes obvious the older he got, and the stronger and more insane he grew, very easily earning him the Silver Medal of Evil. Not to mention the fact he has a body count in the hundreds, and feels no remorse from what we can see. Finally, we have to head over to Massachusetts to award the Gold Medal of Evil to Whitey Bulger from Black Mass. Whitey was actually a real mobster from Boston, who was every bit as sadistic and sociopathic as the movie portrays him to be. In the movie, we see Whitey commit several particularly grim murders, including strangling his associate's stepdaughter for being too much of a risk with the cops, as well as torturing and killing another informant in a grungy basement, before having his teeth and fingernails ripped out of his corpse, so the body can't be ID'd. He also commits several murders in broad daylight and stabs pretty much everyone in the back to avoid being caught or to make money. There are two reasons why Whitey gets the Gold Medal of Evil. The first being that he is portrayed as genuinely sadistic, to the point where he enjoys what he does, which is likely based off the real-life accounts of former associates who said that if he wasn't a mobster, Whitey likely would have been a serial killer. And also the simple fact that unlike other characters, Whitey Bulger was a real person, which makes this role significantly darker. And even though his kill count was smaller than our Silver Medal of Evil winner, his kills were far more sadistic and personal. So with our morality spectrum wrapped up, let's finish things off by awarding a few Sinner medals. Taking our Darwin Medal is surprisingly Sherlock Gnomes, who gets so entranced in his work that he causes a lot of damage, not to mention how he reacts around Irene. The Envy Medal goes to Mort Rainey, who kills his ex-wife and her husband because he was envious of their relationship. The Lust Medal goes to Gilbert Grape, who has an affair with a married woman and has a pretty substantial subplot with another lady. The Sloth Medal goes to Raoul Duke, mainly because of how he acts when he's under the influence of drugs. The Greed Medal obviously goes to John Dillinger, whose whole thing is that he's a bank robber. Another obvious one, the Gluttony Medal, belongs to Willy Wonka, who once again runs a chocolate factory and is obsessed with candy. The Pride Medal goes to Grindelwald, who feels he is entitled to becoming ruler of the wizarding world because he saw it as a potential future. And finally, our Wrath Medal goes to a very deserving Whitey Bulger, who was, quite literally, an angry and explosive psychopath who killed anyone who got in his way. But let us know in the comment section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist. Podcast, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.